For now though, the 1800X is a disappointment and is not a processor we would recommend for gamers at its price point. Even mixed workload users should consider when and where software acceleration is better than GPU acceleration, if ever.
Time and time again, we see people getting crushed by overhyping and not managing their expectations. AMD Ryzen's launch proves this. However, I believe that the gaming-related issues were way overblown. I will try to address those gaming-related issues while taking a quick high-level dive into Ryzen's architecture. So the premise is that Ryzen's gaming performance is below expectations. Now, taking into account the inevitable IPC and clock speed deficit, they combined should account for 8 to 12% performance disadvantage to Intel's favor, depending on the SKU. We can see this is the case when we look at DX11 gaming benchmarks. We notice that Ryzen is performing within its expected performance bracket compared to Intel's parts. However, when we take a look at DX12 benchmarks, we see a different story. Here Ryzen is performing worse on DX12 versus DX11, which is counterintuitive since the low-level API increases performance by parallelizing draw calls among threads. And since Ryzen got 16 threads to work with, it should do better on DX12 than it does on DX11. However, we can see that from the DX12 benchmarks that this is not the case. So what's going on? At first, people thought that Windows Scheduler is not handling tasks correctly, which makes sense since toggling SMT off increases performance. People hypothesized that Scheduler is assigning a task for 2 logical threads instead of 1 logical per 1 physical thread assignment. However, PC Perspective had an article explaining how this is not the case, and that Windows Scheduler is aware of Ryzen's topology. A deeper dive into Ryzen's core complex design, however, holds the key to the Ryzen performance issues. The core complex design that AMD implements got many area advantages. However, it has one small disadvantage: latency. And it might be responsible for the aforementioned performance issues. By design, a core complex holds 4 physical cores, the L1 cache, the L2 cache, and the shared L3 cache among the SoC. In order for one core complex to talk to another core complex, they need to have a link, AMD's Infinity Fabric in this case. However, this link will add a measurable latency compared to within-core complex communication. Because of this design, DX12 tasks are getting spilled over the 2 core complexes instead of being contained in one single core complex, which in turn adds latency. Because a thread now is waiting for communications to occur between one complex and another. So we notice a performance drop in gaming workloads. If we look at the numbers, complex-to-complex latency is around 140 nanoseconds versus the 40 nanoseconds for within the same core complex communications. Assuming a 3 GHz base frequency, it means that 600,000 Hz wasted every time you have a task getting spilled among 2 core complexes. Most professional workloads, such as photo, video editing, 3D rendering, are largely unaffected by this latency issue. This is due to the nature of the workload. However, games are affected by this latency issue to a certain degree. Now, games require the lowest latency possible to render as many frames as possible in a single second. And if you're running a lower resolution, say 1080p, which most reviewers emphasize on, you will notice a larger performance gap versus Intel parts than say running games at 1440p and 4K, where you have fewer frames to render and thus latency will not be a big issue. So, solutions. Microsoft and AMD need to work together on optimizing Windows Scheduler and its task handling, because although it's aware of the logical and the physical cores, it's assigning tasks that spill into 2 core complexes instead of being contained in a single core complex. And we can also have game developers, and especially game engine developers, to optimize apps to be more Ryzen core complex aware. Now, you might say that this would take months for all game developers and Microsoft to implement such optimizations. I, however, don't think so. AMD, despite its smaller market share compared to Intel, it has a better relationship with game developers and Microsoft than Intel does. And the reason for this is consoles. AMD supplies the SoC that goes into the PS4 and the Xbox One, as well as the next generation Xbox Scorpio, and the PS5 will likely also use Ryzen. And since most games are being ported from consoles to PCs, I expect AMD to have the advantage. And games will be optimized to a Haswell or Broadwell level of performance at the same clock speed. So is Ryzen the disappointment that some would like you to believe? I don't think so. I believe if you're building a gaming system, the R7 1700 is a great value for the money, especially if you're going to stream your games. I will make another video where I discuss Ryzen's mixed and professional workloads. Thank you for watching.